All right, this COVID-19 origins cover-up. Let's get to this, and I'll take from the summary from Red State as well as go back and forth with the Wall Street Journal. It's absolutely fascinating. Let me start by reading some of the Wall Street Journal piece behind closed doors. The Spy World scientists who argued COVID was a lab leak. All right, and it starts out this way. A car and driver had been ready to whisk Jason Bannon from FBI headquarters early one morning in August of 2021 to brief the White House on a novel virus that was killing hundreds of thousands of Americans and had stopped the world in its tracks. 1.2 million Americans died from the Chinese virus. Bannon had been told by his superiors to be on hand in case the FBI was asked to join a top intelligence community briefing for the president. But the White House summons never came. Bannon, a PhD in microbiology, had joined the Bureau after 9/11 in New York and Washington when the agency bulked up its expertise to deal with the threat of germ weapons, toxins, and other weapons of mass destruction. But for more than a year, he had spent most of his waking hours on the COVID-19 virus that had seeped out of China in 2019. Really? It seeped out of China in 2019? You mean our intelligence agencies knew that? Huh. Frustrated by China's stonewalling, Biden had ordered an urgent assessment by the U.S. intelligence agencies and national laboratories on whether the virus had leapt from an animal to a human or had escaped from a Chinese lab that had been doing extensive work on coronaviruses. The dominant view within the intelligence community was clear when Avril Haines, the director of national intelligence, and a couple of her senior analysts briefed Biden and his top aides on August 24. The National Intelligence Council, that's a body of senior intelligence officers who reported to Haines and that organized the intelligence review, had concluded that, quote, low confidence, close quote, that COVID-19 had emerged when the virus leapt from an animal to a human. So did 4 intelligence agencies. Oddly enough, and frankly, shockingly enough, there was one intelligence agency that drew a different conclusion. That happened to be the FBI. The FBI was the only agency that concluded a lab leak was likely, a judgment it had rendered with, quote unquote, moderate confidence. But neither Bannon nor any other FBI officials were even at the briefing to make their case firsthand to Joe Biden. Bannon says this: being the only agency that assessed that a laboratory origin was more likely and the agency that expressed the highest level of confidence in its analysis of the source of the pandemic, we anticipated the FBI would be asked to attend the briefing. He says, I find it surprising that the White House didn't ask. Now, I'm going to read between the lines, too. Actually, not between the lines. I'm going to say something that just popped into my head. You guys understand that the FBI used to be a law enforcement agency. They're kind of new to the counterintelligence game. Guys, if the FBI was able to figure out that this was a lab leak, and you're talking about our DNI, Avril Haines, CIA, these agencies weren't able to figure it out? I mean, that's what they do. To me, that's just as scary. The FBI should have been the one that was wrong. A spokesman for the DNI office said that it wasn't standard practice to invite representatives from individual agencies to briefings for the president. It's not standard practice. Who cares? 1.2 million Americans died. No big deal. What gives? The Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the National Intelligence Council's work on COVID-19 origins compiled with all of the intelligence community's analytic standards, including objectivity, according to the spokeswoman. But an investigation by, guess who, the Wall Street Journal, shows that the disagreements among intelligence experts over what should be included in the report ran deeper than is publicly known. I'll wrap up with that when we get back. Let me just sum this up the best that I can. It wasn't just the FBI that concluded that this was COVID came from a lab leak. The National Center for Medical Intelligence did so as well. They backed that theory. They even specifically cited evidence that, quote, gain-of-function research was taking place in Wuhan. The findings of those scientists were ignored altogether. Why? Because the Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, had come to a different conclusion, and they didn't tolerate any other theories. And think about this. Notice how this web of intelligence agencies, if you will, can be manipulated to present a certain narrative, regardless of whether something is true or not. I mean, this is scary. 3 scientists within the DIA concluded COVID came from a leak. 3 scientists at the National Center for Medical Intelligence, part of the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency, conducted a scientific study that concluded COVID-19 was, in fact, manipulated in a laboratory in a risky research effort. But that analysis was at odds with the assessment of their parent agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency. Wow. Remember, we were asking, how come Biden isn't finding out answers as to whether or not this lab leak occurred? He was never told. And he was a dementia patient. His staff has been running things. These agencies have been running things. Oh, my Lord. Trump has so much work to do when he gets in and cutting down the deep state. It's going to be a huge task. But luckily, I think we just elected a guy that's up for the challenge.